Hi guys, hold on for a second. Before we proceed to the video, I have something very important to tell you. Professor John Vikofas has published his new book in collaboration with Little French Media, and the title of the book is Neoliberalism, Inequality, and Authoritarianism. This book details how neoliberalism impacts the geopolitical economy in the 21st century. You can buy it from Amazon, and the link is in the description. Thank you. Now let's proceed to the video.
Hello everyone, welcome. This is a teaser video, an introduction basically to a much longer analytical video on inter-imperialist rivalry. The election of Donald Trump for his second administration, his second term, which started on January 20th, 2025, has launched a debate and a lot of analysis on the nature of imperialism and whether, in fact, the United States is now openly a country that advocates 19th century style imperialism, considering the very blunt statements about making Canada the 51st state of the United States, um, buying Greenland when it's not for sale, retaking the Panama Canal, and of course, two of the most rather um, puzzling are one is the uh, issue of converting Gaza into a French Riviera type of resort without Palestinians, of course, but for rather for rich people. In other words, turning it into a expensive real estate. That has certainly generated a lot of debate globally, um, especially with Arab countries, which historically have been allied with the United States, including Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Jordan, by the way. The other issue that has raised some eyebrows and people now openly talking about the United States as an unashamedly imperialist country, because this is what the policy seems to be, is Ukraine. The fact that the Trump administration apparently demanded, and it may get, half of Ukraine's mineral assets um, as payment for what it has contributed to Ukraine's security and what it will be contributing down the road, but also half of the receipts, the profits, not the receipts, the profits that Ukraine may secure from third parties by signing contracts with countries or governments or corporations. Half the receipts, including, of course, Ukraine's port access to those ports that would be under U.S. Control. All of this is reminiscent of 19th century style imperialism. And I want to start with the word imperialism. The word imperialism did become popular in the late 19th century. In fact, in the late 1870s, during the Benjamin Disraeli government, Prime Minister of England, when critics were calling him an imperialist, and those who supported him obviously defending Benjamin Disraeli's imperialist policies. The term really was taken at a higher level of debate and concern in 1902, after the Boer War in South Africa, behind which were the British and the Germans, behind the the Dutch farmers that were fighting against the British were the Germans. And an English scholar, his name was John A. Hobson, wrote a book called Imperialism, a Study. And that book really is the foundation of the study of imperialism, classical imperialism, for the age of imperialism. The age of imperialism is 1870 to 1914. Hobson actually argued that the wars of imperialism in the late 19th century among the great powers would, unfortunately, this is 1902 that he published this, would lead to a global war. And that's exactly what happened in 1914. In other words, 12 years after he published this book, there was a global war exactly as he predicted in 1902. Vladimir Lenin, Rosa Luxemburg, others used Hobson's book to provide their own analysis from a Marxist perspective on the nature of imperialism. Imperialism, very briefly, simply means imposing one state imposing hegemony over another country or countries, um, and exploiting their labor and their resources. So exploitation and domination or hegemony are at the core of imperialism. And the ultimate goal in the age of imperialism during the second industrial revolution was to secure market share. There was a struggle for market share, considering that there were three countries. Actually, let me add a fourth: Italy. Italy unified. There was no Italy before 1860. It unified in 1860 and tried to industrialize, and it too wanted to become a colonial power. In 1870, 10 years later, Germany industrializes, and it too competed for market share. And of course, how do you do that when the world is already divided? That is, the global south is divided by the great powers, so other than going taking it from them, which means going to war, hence wars of imperialism. The other two countries that industrialize, and they too get into the game of imperialism, of exploitation and domination, hegemony, are the United States in the late 1870s and Japan in the late 19th century, from 1870 onward, and Japan in the later part of the 19th century. So you have new countries coming in, industrializing very rapidly, and wanting a share of the global market, and using military means to secure it. That's the classical era of imperialism. This doesn't mean that there was no imperialism in ancient Persia, which went to wars in the region, in the Middle East, and of course, crossing over to southeastern Europe, namely the Greek city states. Athens was imperialistic, or the Roman Empire, Republic, and Empire were imperialistic. So imperialism has been around, of course, for many centuries. China, of course, was imperialistic under Genghis Khan, Kublai Khan. So we have imperialism on a world scale long before the term becomes popular. Now, it became popular recently because, as I stated, the United States openly and unapologetically um, has a president who's clearly stated that the U.S. demands Greenland, demands the Panama Canal, expects Canada to become the 51st state. And just recently, the Trump admin, one of the closest advisors, Peter Navarro, in the Trump administration, I believe it was him, suggested that the map of Canada and the United States, that is the border, be redrawn. This obviously is very destabilizing stuff. Now, in this longer video, what I argue is that the United States obviously is pursuing a classical 19th century style, openly, it seems, economic and military imperialism, because obviously it has the economic and the military muscle to do this. Imperialism, my argument is that imperialism is an integral part of the capitalist world system. And while China and Russia and countries like Brazil, which support the multilateral and multidimensional, multipolar, I should say, multipolar world order rather than a unipolar world order in which the US is hegemonic, while they claim this, they too, all of those countries, China and the BRICS nations, Russia included, of course, are part of the same world system. And like I said, imperialism is within the structure of capitalism. Capitalism is hierarchical geographically and socioeconomically, and the core countries within the capitalist system are in the position, as well as the semi-periphery, but not necessarily, obviously not the periphery, are in the position to impose imperialist terms, that is of terms of unequal exchange. Um, and what I argue is that, contrary to much of the analysis that has been done, there is no doubt that China and Russia are imperialist. It's just that the modalities differ. There is no doubt that China, by the very nature, no matter the rhetoric that it has, but especially under President Xi Jinping, that he's interested in the mutual benefit, mutual development of the entire world. The countries participating in the Belt and Road Initiative program of global economic integration. There's no doubt that the fact that China is the world's number one manufacturing country, number one trading partner for the world, by the way, and number one in GDP when measured in purchasing power parity versus nominal value, which is the United States, just by the virtue of that kind of economic muscle on the planet, it is in the position to determine the terms of trade and um, determine a great deal of how it shapes the global balance of power at the economic level, but also geopolitical. Now, the United States, now it does not use destabilizing powers, destabilizing policies through military means like the United States. So that is true. Analysts as well as the Chinese government are correct that they're not out to destabilize. They don't have 750 they're not in they don't have 750 bases or military presence in something like 170 countries around the world like the United States. Their military presence is confined, I think, to two or three countries: Kyrgyzstan, Djibouti, and I forget which other, but there are only two or three places that they have a military presence, because their goal is really global economic integration. It is not to use the defense sector, the military, the geopolitical mechanism to achieve market share. They already have it, and their goal is to build on it. So it's in their interest to have global stability, whereas it is the interest of the United States to destabilize, to slow them down. So this inter-imperialist rivalry has to be looked at the relative power of one in one area, namely China in the economic area, the United States in the domain of military, because the U.S. is in an economic has been an economic decline, um, and it continues along that trajectory. And Russia, of course, is the other player, and Russia is interested in rebuilding some of what it lost during the Gorbachev and Yeltsin era, that is in the late 80s and early 90s, with the disintegration of the Soviet Union. So they are interested in maintaining, using, by the way, the old policies of the Romanov dynasty under the Russian Empire, and then the continued Soviet Union's policy of internal colonization, that is controlling as much area in Eurasia as possible. When you look at the map of the old Soviet Union, as well as the Romanov era empire, so they are interested in that. And what they did in Ukraine, contrary to what Trump said, that it was Ukraine that started the war, obviously was not. Ukraine, agitated, encouraged by the United States and NATO, especially by the United States, but it was Russia that made the decision based on what it defines as national security interests. That's indisputable, no matter what Trump says. So we have an inter-imperialist rivalry, and it is best to analyze this as objectively, not partisanly as possible. And the reason, one last point, and I'll end with this, the reason that many scholars, regardless of whether they're on the right, the center, or the left, become caught up in, and the issues become obfuscated, that is confusing and cloudy, is because the nation state is the context in which all of us analyze, whether we're professionals or not, analyze imperialism and rivalries between countries, when in fact transcending the nation state is a global uh, economic system, namely the capitalist world economy. I invite you to take a look at the longer video. I thank you for listening, and I ask you to write questions, comments, and by all means join this channel, which my very good friend Asad Alim manages very well. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.